All right, let's dive right in. We're talking strategic cyber defense today, and it all boils down to one simple but honestly pretty powerful question.
I mean, think about it. This is the central challenge of our time, right? Your most valuable stuff, it's not gold in a vault anymore. It's data. And your borders, they're not stone walls. They're just lines of code. The old playbook for defense, totally out the window.
So let's really lean into that idea. Every organization is basically a digital fortress, and that's the playbook we're going to walk through. We'll use this whole fortress analogy to break down the strategies and tools that keep everything locked down, starting right from the ground up.
Okay, so first things first, you got to build the walls, right? A really strong defense always starts with a smart, resilient architecture. It's all about designing a fortress that's built to withstand the attacks you know are coming.
But here's the thing. Unlike a regular old stone castle, these digital fortresses aren't just in one spot. They're usually a hybrid. You've got some parts on-premise, servers you actually own and manage, and other parts out there in the massive shared world of the cloud. And getting those two to play nicely together? Yeah, that takes some seriously intelligent design.
So how do you get the most bang for your buck, space-wise? Well, that's where virtualization comes in. It's kind of like technological magic, really. It lets one single physical server pretend to be a whole bunch of separate servers, and that is brilliant for efficiency. Instead of a huge, sprawling city, you get this dense, super-organized tower with different specialized workshops on every single floor.
Okay, but what about tasks where you don't need a permanent workshop at all? That's the idea behind serverless computing. Your fortress doesn't need to keep a full-time blacksmith on the payroll just in case a horse needs a new shoe. Nope. You just call in a specialist when you need them, they do the job, and poof, they're gone. It's just incredibly efficient with your resources. And moving stuff around the kingdom safely? That's where containerization is a game changer. Just think of it like a standardized shipping container. You pack an application and everything it needs to run right inside this box. And the best part? That container can be moved from your own castle to any cloud kingdom out there, and it just works perfectly. It's really the backbone of any flexible modern setup.
But here's what's really cool. The one rule that governs this entire modern fortress. It's called zero trust. And the idea is actually pretty simple, but it's also profound. It basically says, I don't care if you're inside the walls or outside. Every single request to open a door, to look at a file, anything, has to be completely verified. This is a huge shift from the old castle and moat way of thinking. Now, you just assume threats might already be inside, so you trust no one and nothing by default.
All right, so the walls are up, they're designed well, but a fortress is totally useless without guards on the walls, right? So now, let's talk about the active, day-to-day job of actually watching those walls for any sign of trouble.
So, let's meet your digital guards. You've got your intrusion detection system, the IDS. That's the lookout who spots trouble and just screams, "Hey, intruders!" Then you have the intrusion prevention system, or IPS. That's the guard who not only spots the bad guy, but also slams the gate right in their face. You absolutely need both, but you can see how the IPS is way more proactive.
But how do you know what's really going on? Well, you have to look at the city's memory. And in the digital world, that memory is its logs. I mean, every single action, every door that's opened, every message sent, it's all recorded in this massive, super detailed ledger. And let me tell you, that ledger is one of the most powerful tools a defender has. And you can't be sloppy with this ledger. There are some strict rules. Rule number 1, all these records get sent to one central, heavily guarded library where they can be analyzed. Rule 2, you make them unchangeable. You absolutely cannot let an intruder sneak in and rewrite history. And third, and this one is so important, every single clock in the city has to be perfectly in sync. Because if your clocks are off, trying to piece together the timeline of an attack is just a nightmare.
Now, a huge part of this is not just waiting around for an attack to happen. Proactive defense is all about something called system hardening. Basically, it just means reducing the number of ways an attacker can even try to get in. You brick up unused doors by getting rid of software you don't need, you get super strict about who has the keys by limiting admin access, and you're constantly patching up cracks in the walls by keeping everything updated.
And here is a perfect example of a critical spot you have to harden. For any Windows system, the registry is like the master blueprint for the entire fortress. It controls literally everything. And attackers, They love to go after it because one tiny, hidden change there can give them a permanent backdoor or even shut down your defenses completely. Protecting it? Absolutely non-negotiable.
Okay, so we've talked about the outer walls, but now let's move inside to the inner sanctums. What happens if an attacker does get past the gates? How do you protect the most valuable stuff inside the city? Well, this part is all about keys, treasures, and secrets.
Let's kick things off with the keys. A simple password that's like having just one lock on a door. If someone steals that one key, well, they're in. Game over. But multi-factor authentication, or MFA, that's like putting multiple, different kinds of locks on that same door. So maybe an attacker steals one key, but they're still stuck because they need the others to get inside.
And this is a great example of one of those other keys. An authenticator app on your phone. That's something you physically have, and it generates a brand new key every 30 seconds. So even if an attacker manages to steal your password, it's totally useless without this little code that's constantly changing. It is just a massive leap forward for security.
Of course, not all keys are created equal, right? The keys to the front gate aren't the same as the keys to the Royal Treasury. And that's where Privileged Access Management, or PAM, comes into play. This is the whole system for controlling those all-powerful super user accounts. It runs on something called the principle of least privilege, which is a fancy way of saying you only give people the exact keys they need to do their job, and absolutely nothing more.
But what if the threat isn't someone breaking in? What if an insider tries to smuggle treasure out? That's exactly what data loss prevention, or DLP, is for. Think of it like a final checkpoint. It's the guards at the main gate who inspect every single cart leaving the fortress, making sure no one's sneaking out with secret blueprints or bags of gold.
And what kind of treasure are we talking about here? It's the crown jewels of the digital age. Your personal information, credit card numbers, financial records, medical info, all that confidential company stuff and intellectual property. DLP systems are specifically trained to recognize this kind of data and stop it in its tracks if it tries to leave without permission.
Okay, so we've built the walls, we've posted the guards, we've secured the treasury. We're done, right? No way. The work is never, ever done. Defense isn't something you do once and forget about. It's a constant, never-ending state of vigilance.
And this quote really just ties it all together perfectly. Detecting threats? That's your City Watch, your IDS and IPS. Analyzing them? That's you carefully going over the city ledger, the logs. And responding? That's strengthening the locks on all the doors with things like MFA and PAM. You see, it's a continuous cycle. Detect, analyze, respond. Over and over.
And that really brings us to the final, most important point of all. This isn't just some abstract thing for big companies. Your own digital life, your email, your bank accounts, your social media, that is your own personal fortress. So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. Are you checking your locks?